Bob and Janice Carter used to finance their grown daughter's little hobby known as TNA wrestling, until they stopped because they were tired of losing millions of dollars. They're awful parents. But when they did give her money, she used it to bring in one former WCW and WWE main eventer after the next. Some of these former stars still did have a bit to give, and it could be exciting watching them debut, but almost none of them were worth that investment. After joining the company, the TNA ecosystem quickly ate them up and made them feel like just any other wrestler in no time until they had an entire roster of Shawn Stasiaks. Well, I'm Andrew with WhatCulture, and here are 10 big TNA signings who were completely wasted. Number 10, Hulk Hogan. The Hulkster was badly overpaid in TNA, but they shouldn't be too ashamed about that because he was also completely wasted, so they should leave some of their shame for that. In late 2009, Hogan and Bischoff signed on to join TNA. Now, many fans were leery because they were like, hey, remember that time they were the head of a gigantic wrestling company and helped run it into the ground? Well, maybe they'd learned from their past mistakes, so we briefly gave them the benefit of the doubt, and then they immediately made every single mistake again. They took all of the big storylines for themselves, they didn't push new talent, and the Ultimate Warrior once showed up in a mirror. They had that footage erased from YouTube, so don't bother looking for it. Anyway, as a babyface GM type who shows up once an episode, Hogan could have given a rub to the younger talent and been a net positive for the company. But he was badly overexposed and given one terrible storyline after the next. During that time, TNA was as painful as watching a 2-year-long version of No Holds Barred. Number 9, Diamond Dallas Page. DDP's run in WWE is pretty universally recognized as one of the most embarrassing pushes of a big star over the past couple of decades. To top things off, it was Bob Holly who sent him into retirement. Somehow, a few years later, DDP put the boots on once again and joined TNA. What were the big plans for him? Well, first he relived a WCW feud from 6 years earlier with Raven, and then he moved on to Jeff Jarrett, who was probably like, why did I have to wait 3 weeks to go over DDP? I want to do it right now. Missing in all of that was Page wrestling somebody like AJ Styles and then putting him over, just like Randy Savage did for him years earlier. You can blame creative though for botching this feel-good return story and not giving him younger talent to work with, so his entire run was pretty much a waste of time. Luckily, he has his millions of dollars from DDP Yoga to fall back on, otherwise, I'd feel kinda bad for him. Number 8, Matt Morgan. Matt Morgan had a pretty lengthy TNA career, it just wasn't that good of one. After leaving WWE, he saw a speech therapist and lost his stuttering issue. But then he started talking really fast and yelling a lot. When he joined TNA, he was far and away the most athletic big man in the business, but he was presented as a mid-carder for most of his run and was essentially the blueprint of a guy who could be pinned really easily. He received one big feud when he faced Kurt Angle at Bound for Glory 2009. The fans were finally getting behind Morgan, and it seemed the perfect time to pull the trigger on that big push and giving him the win. TNA, though, felt otherwise. Angle won, and the following month, Morgan jobbed to Rhino in Team 3D. He never recovered. Number 7, Taz. Newer fans had known Taz as the chuckling, affable announcer on SmackDown for years, but before that he was the human suplexing machine, and deep down you knew he wanted to cut one of those badass promos from his ECW days and help put somebody over. Samoa Joe was chosen to be his protege, and the two briefly were a part of the Main Event Mafia, and then Taz left the group to go chuckle his way onto commentary. Hearing Taz's voice every show just felt like another case of promoting WWE guys over TNA originals, so casting him in a different role like a manager would have at least felt a bit different, and kept Don West around who, you know what, I'm gonna say it, he really wasn't that bad as a color commentator. And Tenay and Taz together? What else can you say but meh. Number 6, Kevin Nash. Big Sexy was still a beloved figure when he joined TNA, at least with mainstream fans at the time. And while he did receive a couple of big singles pushes in the company, he was often a background player and, dare I say, a bit underutilized. Nash's pairing with Alex Shelley in Paparazzi Productions was pure gold, and it was great to see Nash play a more comedic version of the Shawn Michaels and Diesel dynamic back in the day. Unfortunately, the company pulled the plug on it and moved Nash into a boring singles act. By the time he started doing jobs to guys like Samoa Joe, the matches weren't built up enough or treated like a big deal to mean anything. So Big Daddy Cool was largely booked like Big Daddy Lame in TNA. Number 5, Mickie James. Oh, Mickie, what a pity, TNA didn't understand how to push you. Mickie was vastly underutilized in WWE, and fans couldn't wait to see her appear on Impact. But had the behind-the-scenes players in TNA actually watched her over the years, they would have known what got her over, playing a psycho love interest of Trish, not a babyface who dressed up like a cowboy. When she entered TNA, she was, of course, pushed as a face who was better than every other knockout combined ×2 plus 7, except for perhaps fellow WWE alumni Tara. Unless the company was going to fill out the rest of the Knockouts division with worthy challengers for Mickie, and, have her give a rub to the homegrown talent, then it was a complete waste of time and money. At least she met her husband Magnus while there, so hey, I'm happy for her. Number 4, Mick Foley. When Foley first came into TNA, it seemed like a pretty big deal. He was a hero of the Attitude Era and left well before he wore out his welcome. Of course, in TNA, he quickly was placed in a storyline with Kurt Angle and Jeff Jarrett. Also, like Nash, Foley was involved in a brief angle with Alex Shelley, which could have potentially made him a star in the company, but then, of course, that was dropped. Poor Shelley. Foley basically reverted to a goofball commissioner type role from the year 2000, which felt really dated in 2008, let alone 2016. And he continued to rub elbows on air with the likes of Sting, Hulk Hogan, and yeah, Jarrett. The lowlight of Foley's time there was his participation in the absolutely ridiculously embarrassing ECW reunion called EV 2.0. Oh, and he was also TNA Heavyweight World Champion at one point. Foley was a really good ambassador for TNA, but they never treated him with much respect. You know, like bothering to mention his Daily Show appearances. In the end, neither Foley nor TNA seemed to have a nice day, or really a nice run with each other. Number 3, Booker T. It's hard to think of a really good moment of Booker T in TNA. Let me try. Okay, yeah, I got nothing. You have to put a lot of the blame on him, as he just seemed to be mentally checked out and was wondering what Stevie Ray was up to. But management certainly didn't give him anything really exciting to do. Booker's first feud in the company was against Bobby Roode, which sounds nice, but they just didn't click and it dragged on for months. It killed any momentum that Booker had. Maybe they were just two guys who didn't work well together. It happens. Let's just not cast blame. By the end of his run in TNA, it seemed that Booker only wanted to be there to goof around with Kevin Nash and earn a nice paycheck for doing it. It's a really good job if you can get it, but it's a shame that all that excitement of coming into the company quickly disappeared like a spinaroonie into the wind. Number 2, Jeff Hardy. Even though Jeff was often given a decent push in TNA, they still lost a lot of money by not using him right. Basically, he was absolutely wasted in TNA. Feel free to insert Victory Road 2011 jokes right here. His first run in TNA in 2004 to 2006 was a bit of a mess, so he went back to WWE. But by the time he returned in 2010, he had become a crazy popular babyface. Inserting him into the number 1 babyface role, and then lining up a series of heel challengers was a great way to finally make some money. But as we've learned, TNA has this weird fear of making money. Hardy was given the TNA heavyweight title, but as a heel, which was a really bad swerve. He then had a few lackluster years before rediscovering himself as a character as part of the Broken Universe. It's goofy fun, but not really a big money-making act like they could have had with Jeff. TNA Creative did a really good job of basically making him obsolete. And coming in at number 1 is Ric Flair. Flair's most well-remembered and loved TNA moment is Jay Lethal doing an impression of him on air. I really hope those hundreds of thousands of dollars spent to bring him in was worth those few minutes of screen time. In 2010, Flair joined Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff in the newest era of TNA. For many fans, Flair's involvement was much more exciting than the other two, as he didn't have a reputation for personally leg-dropping an entire company out of existence. TNA made the first big mistake of casting him as a heel. Nobody wanted to boo the elder statesman at that point in his career, especially after his unbelievable WWE send-off. They also didn't want to see him step inside the ring, and if they did, then it would have to be because of a hugely anticipated, year-long storyline where he'd have to absolutely be forced to wrestle one more time, and not to just take on Sting in a battle of the Who Aged Worse match. The company briefly had the right idea when they tried to form a new Four Horsemen-like stable with Fortune, but of course they quickly squandered that plan when they put like 17 guys in the 4-man group and then had them all turn on each other. Despite Flair being one of the greatest talents of all time in the wrestling industry, so few promoters have really known what the hell to do with him. TNA was no exception. What a waste. Well, that's the list. Got any more wasted TNA talent? Sound off below. I'm Andrew with WhatCulture, and you can follow me at Andrew Socek on Twitter, and make sure to subscribe, share, and like.